The OODA Loop. What does this mean? Well, when we talk about mental preparation, we talk about dealing with a firearm, how to use it properly and whatnot. You need to know what are the mental and emotional considerations of not only a real-life altercation, but also your training. And that's what we're going to cover in this video right now.
With the mental conditioning, you got to figure out what you're willing to do to protect yourself, right? They talk about that if you ever go to any survival schools. Your ability to survive in the wild is based off what you're willing to do. You've got to figure out what you're willing to do before you get into these situations. Preparation. Your body can't go where your mind hasn't been. Bruce Lee says that. Matt likes to say it a lot. Very, very true. If I've never thought through it, if I've never worked through it, it's hard to suddenly get it done, right? It's really hard to learn Kung Fu off of a video, right? I need to practically apply it. I need to practice it. I need to do stuff with it. If you don't mentally prepare for horrible situations, you're going to freeze when they happen. You're not going to rise to the occasion. You're going to fall to your level of training. And you better hope that your level of training is high, right? If your level of training is once a year you draw the weapon 3 times, that's a rough one. There's what's called an OODA Loop. This was created by a fighter pilot named Colonel Boyd. What he discovered is that people who could go through this OODA Loop that he theorized on were really good fighter pilots. And what he said is that you needed to observe, orient, decide, and act. And that you can't skip a step. The human brain can't skip a step. Current psychology and all the neurofunctioning stuff has told us that this is a pretty solid thing. This guy was ahead of his time. So the first thing that has to happen, he starts to draw a weapon on me. I have to observe that the movement is happening, right? Once I've observed it, my brain has to orient to it. It has to identify that movement. I see movement. What is that movement? Now it orients to that movement and goes, oh, that's a gun getting drawn. Now my brain has to decide what it's going to do about that. Well, shoot, I'm going to step to the side and draw my own weapon and shoot this guy. All right, decision made. Now I have to act and implement it. It takes time for each of the steps in the OODA Loop, and they are measured in milliseconds to it. But to get completely through the OODA Loop, if you were prepared for it, is usually 1/2 to 3/4 of a second. Which means your opponent generally has, if you were really paying attention and good, 1/2 to 3/4 of a second on you. And if not, second and a half, 2 seconds, just depends on how quick that you are in reacting and how smooth you are in reacting to that. But you can't skip a step. You can't observe something and start acting because your brain didn't orient. It doesn't know what that is, and it hasn't decided what it's going to do yet. It has to go through those steps. How do you get through this stuff? 2 options. You can expect it, and you can train it. So if I have trained to deflect a punch over and over and over again, deflect a punch and strike, right? Deflect a punch and strike, deflect a punch and strike, right? Block and hit, block and hit, block and hit. And I train it and train it and train it and train it. When the punch comes in, what am I probably going to do? Block and hit. Right? Why? Because that's my key response to that. My OODA Loop's going to set on that really quick. If I wasn't paying attention and the punch comes in, though, it's got a higher likelihood of connecting, right? So the other thing is I need to be paying attention, right? I need to be paying attention and have a trained response that fits the bill. Here's where the OODA Loop has problems. If your body observes and orients, and it orients on something it doesn't have a response for, it's never been in this situation, so it doesn't know what to do, the decision part stops. And it goes back to the last thing it figured out, and it did right. So this is why you'll often hear police in videos screaming, drop the gun, 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 or I'm going to say drop the gun again. No, seriously, drop the gun. Drop the effing gun. Drop the effing gun, drop the effing gun, drop the effing gun, or I'm going to say drop the effing gun again. Right? They're not getting anywhere, but their brain's in a place that it doesn't understand. They're stuck in their OODA Loop, and the last thing they did was recognize that there was a gun and it needed to be dropped, and they haven't made a decision past that because they're stuck on that OODA Loop. And you don't want stuck in that OODA Loop. You want to be able to transition through that OODA Loop and get done what you need to get done. So you've trained the response and you know what to do, and we talked about that, and you can move through that OODA Loop more quickly. The other thing is pain. Pain needs to be a trained response. Why? So this took me a while. This is one of the most difficult things I did in training after I learned this technique. Anytime I hurt myself, I bust a knuckle trying to fix a car, I cut myself with a knife, I do whatever, I ignore it. I ignore it and I continue the task I was doing until I'm in control again, and now I'll go figure out if I need stitches, right? But my body is not allowed to shut down for pain. I have slowly taught it that. What happens? So now we're in Krav and I take a punch I didn't mean to, or somebody hits me harder than expected and I go, oof, and just keep going. Why? Because I'm used to continuing to function after pain. We use pain compliance techniques when we train our officers in their scenarios, right? We put pain on them while they're doing stuff, whether it's a little shock probe to hurt them when they make a mistake, or we hit them with sim rounds that hurt. And what am I teaching them? Keep going. You can't stop because it hurts. Why do I say that? Because when you decide you need to use your gun, or you decide you need to protect yourself, you're reactive, generally speaking, right? It's because I observed some other issue, oriented, decided, and acted against that issue. Probably they got the first punch. Probably they got the weapon in the fight first. Probably they're ahead of me. And if I've taught myself pain means quit, I'm even further back on where I want to be for this. If you're walking through the hallway in the middle of the night and you step on a Lego, that'll kill you, right? Those things are evil. Right, that'll take you out, 911, right? Get the medics there with the fentanyl, put me out of my misery, right? However, and this is especially for the dudes in here, if I told you, I'll buy you your favorite beer, or here's $100, and I poured a bunch of Legos across the floor and said you gotta walk across it barefoot. Ha! Why? Because you were expecting it to hurt. You knew it was going to hurt. And you steeled yourself up for it, and you got it done because the prize was worth it. Same concept, right? Same concept is what we're looking at. If you get into a fist fight, expect to get hit. Knife fight, expect to get cut. Gun fight, expect to get shot. If you're not expecting those things and you don't have a plan for when it goes, you're already going to be behind the power curve in that. So there are mental awareness levels. The same concepts that went into this OODA Loop started thinking about, okay, well, if there's levels of preparedness and levels of paying attention, let's look at these levels of paying attention, right? And so they created a color code system, and they're white, yellow, orange, red, and black. They're up there for you. White, completely unaware, is that color code. And white level awareness, I am completely unaware. Then we move into yellow. Yellow is what we call functional awareness. There's no perceived threat. I'm not expecting a threat. I'm just paying attention. I'm functionally aware. I'm going to work on this, right? Condition orange. You're alert. Something got my attention. I don't necessarily know that it's a threat, but it has my attention. So I'm in condition yellow, I'm paying attention, I walk out of Walmart. I always park in the back area of the parking lot where my vehicle will be the only vehicle there, and I can see it from a great distance, I can see under it from a great distance, and I can see into it as I approach it. Why? Because it's a lot harder to surprise me from my car that way, right? What's the other thing? Because if I start walking to my car and people start walking the same way I'm walking, that's weird, my car is the only one out there. Right? Why is that happening? So I walk out of Walmart, my car's parked out there, and as I start walking, my yellow alert level goes, hey, there's two dudes by that light pole over there. All right, cool. Right? Processes that, no issue. Right? As I start walking, those two dudes start walking to my car. Gone to condition orange. This isn't normal, but I don't feel threatened yet. Right? They're just walking that way. Maybe they're going to go through that little cutout and walk into the wash like people do or whatever. I don't know. Right? But I'm not like, it's time to smoke them. Right? We're not there. Right? As I start walking to my car, they get to my car and they stop. And they start staring at me. Well, we just went to condition red. I don't know what the threat is, but I don't like this. That ain't right. Now, could they be lost and about to ask me to jump their car? Do they need $1 for gas? Sure, there could be some completely innocuous reason for all this. Could it be a lot worse than that? Yeah, right? So now I'm in, oh crap, I got a real problem here, right? And then they do something that makes me realize I got a threat, and we continue on with what has to be done after this, right? The last stage is what they call black. When you're in condition black, it basically means you blacked out, right? You got overloaded, you were caught unawares, and you couldn't move. So you can't jump color codes, but you can jump to black. You can't jump the others. right? I have to be paying attention in order to move on. Generally, condition black happens because you were in condition white. Something happened and it was too late by the time you got everything figured out. And now in condition black, you're not responsive, right? You don't have plans formulated, your brain's in a loop and it can't figure stuff out. And that's a really bad place to be. Paying attention is a huge thing. There's that old joke that you don't have to run faster than your friend in the forest, you just got to, or faster than the bear in the forest, you just got to run faster than your friend. Same thing, be a harder target, right? When you walk out of Walmart, instead of this, right, just have your head up, looking around. Criminals will tell you, and there's studies and of them actually saying it, they're not looking for the person paying attention unless they have to. If that's the only target, sure, they'll take it. But they want the person not paying attention. They want the person fiddling in their purse. They want the person looking at their bags. They want the person who's carrying a bunch of stuff. They want the person who's looking down at their phone or the ground. They want the person on the phone. Why? Because they're a lot easier to take advantage of. Right? The dude who's paying attention, if I'm trying to rob somebody and there's a dude whose head's on a swivel looking around and there's a dude with his head in his phone, I just got my answer, right? I'm going to go for that guy. He's not even going to know I'm on him until it's too late. The dude paying attention is not worth the effort, right? And that's what you're looking at in that. We're trying to pay enough attention to prevent the problem. What is tactical? Not tactical, right? You see a lot of tactical stuff. The essence of tactical is preparing for a problem now that you think could happen in the future. That's tactical. Why? Because I have a plan for a perceived possibility and I created the solution here and now, right? So, same thing with training Krav, same thing with carrying a weapon, right? Perceived possibility of a problem. I'm trying to take steps now so that I can deal with that problem effectively when it happens, since I can't know when it's going to happen. Right? That's all we're looking at for tactical. I'm trying to get an advantage here. You can run mental schemes where you walk through what you would do in different situations. Don't make the mental scheme, okay, if they pull a gun on me, I shoot them. That's not a mental scheme, right? Walk through the possibility, okay, I'm at an ATM, I don't notice the dude, I suddenly hear crunching and a voice and I turn around. Okay, what am I going to do now? How do I get through that? And then you take your mental scheme and you walk through how you're going to solve that problem. Why? Because you're adding a file to the computer so that when the OODA Loop fires, there's some sort of plan that it can go to. And besides the mental scheme is the practice, but we've talked about that already. Just because you have a gun doesn't mean it should be drawn. It's not always the correct answer to the problem. Matt talked about, well, maybe I'm pointing the gun at this guy and now I suddenly can't shoot him. Yeah, sure, I could be out of ammo, the gun could malfunction, all those things, but what else could happen? Maybe I pulled the gun on him because he had a knife and he dropped the knife. A little harder to articulate shooting this dude now, right? And now he comes forward against me. Well, I could say, well, I thought we were in a fight for the gun. Well, he better be touching the gun when it goes off then. This is the uncomfortable part of the class. Shooting someone. It's not like the movies, right? Like you don't put 2 rounds in some dude's chest and he goes, ooh, and hits the ground and dies quietly and politely, right? It doesn't work that way. Very rarely do people just stop functioning unless the bullet immediately killed them. Usually they die later from the bullet, right? And however long that later is determined by where it hit them, what it damaged, and so forth. Generally, if you get into a shooting, you should expect the person to scream. You should expect the person to call for their mother. You should expect the person to beg you for help. You should expect there to be blood everywhere. Do you recall us shooting that water jug? If I have to shoot you from 3 feet away, do you think I'm not going to get covered in your blood? You should be mentally prepared for what could happen when you have to shoot another human being, right? It is unlikely that they will calmly and politely die for you and not let you experience any mental trauma from the situation, right? And if you are totally unprepared for that and it happens, that's where PTSD comes from. So a lot of what they're looking at now is if you prepare someone for the horrors of something and what traumas could be, and they have a better understanding of them, they're often better prepared to deal with them, and the incidence of PTSD goes down. They can't prevent it, right? They still don't know enough about it to prevent it. But that preparation is key.